The next day, reporters heard that the Air Force had found fragments of the mystery object crashed on a remote ranch northwest of Roswell. Excitement ran high until officials announced it was only a weather balloon. Major Jesse Marcel, in charge of the operation, now tells a far different story.
They took pictures, of course. They had a whole flock of microphones there. They wanted me they wanted some comments from me, but I wasn't at liberty to do that. So all I could do is keep my mouth shut. And General Ramey is the one who discussed, told the newspapers, the newsmen, what it was and to forget about it. It was nothing more than a weather observation balloon, of course, which we both knew differently.
Major Marcel had to keep silent because of his strategic position at that time. He was in charge of all security and intelligence on atomic tests in the United States and the Pacific. Marcel retraced his secret recovery operation across the hot New Mexico desert.
We left Roswell perhaps around 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. As you can see, it's flat. It is very difficult. In fact, with just verbal directions, we never would have found it. We had to follow the rancher out there.
The crash site was so remote, it took an entire day to drive there.
The following morning, we went out to the site where the crash was. And what I saw, I couldn't believe there was so much of it. It was scattered over such a vast area. So we proceeded to pick up as much of the debris as we could, loaded in a wagon. We filled that up. It took us a good part of the day to do that, because there were such small fragments that we had to do a lot of picking. We found a piece of metal about a 1.5 to 2 feet wide and about 2 or 3 feet long. Felt like you had nothing in your hands. It wasn't any thicker than the foil out of a pack of cigarettes. But the thing about that got me is that you couldn't even bend it, you couldn't dead it. Even with a sledgehammer would bounce off of it. So I knew that I had never seen anything like that before. And as of now, I don't know what it was. And nor air travel. This was nothing like that. It could not be. It could not have been.
My name is Jack Trowbridge, and I was assigned to Roswell in April of 1947. I was further assigned into intelligence with Jesse Marcel, who was the head of intelligence, a major. I was a first lieutenant pilot. On this particular evening, we're having bridge at Major Marcel's home. And he was there in a basket. My wife was there. All of intelligence was there playing bridge, except Jesse. He was out with a pickup gathering this junk in the debris field. Okay? So when he came in, it was fairly late, I believe. And we broke up the bridge game then to go out and see what Jess had brought in. And it was a great interest. It was aluminum in appearance. There were fragments of aircraft scanner, whatever the thing was, and also some girders with pictures of hieroglyphic-like things on it. I took them to be owls, but who knows. Anyhow, it was interesting. I did get to handle the material, and the material had some peculiar properties. For instance, it looked like Hershey bar wrappings, but you squeeze it up in your hand as hard as you could, let go, and it returned originally to the original shape instantly. Then the next day, Jesse brought some of the stuff into the intelligence office. And so we looked at it and played with it a while, and then everybody went back to work. Later that day, boom, nobody knows anything, you just shut up, nothing happened, etc. And when you're in the service, you do what they say to do. Major Marcel was called up to Fort Worth to show the press what he found. Well, what he had to show the press was really a weather balloon. This stuff was not a weather balloon, what he brought back. So he was forced to lie to the press, we say. I don't think he was too happy about it, but you do what you're told again. You're in the service. You followed orders. And they were afraid of the American public panicking with this knowledge. I don't think that would have happened, but hey, the word came down from up above and you do what it says.
My name is Carlene Green, and I live here in Roswell. My father was in the Air Force, and he was stationed here at Roswell at the time in 47. He was assigned as part of the cleanup crew out at the site. He had the highest security clearance that the Air Force gives, but he was never able, nor did he ever attempt to discuss the incident. He passed away in 1988. He had his last tour of duty was in Vietnam, where he acquired Agent Orange. Ended up with cancer of the spine. He did not want to die at home. He wanted to die in a military hospital. And as he was laying on the gurney waiting to be loaded into the ambulance, he told me, he said, "Baby," he said, "the story is true." He said, "Don't let anybody try to tell you any different." He said, "The incident happened. There was a spacecraft." He said, "There were graves out there." And I kissed him, and that's the last I got to talk to my dad. But he was very committed gentleman. His love was for the service and his family, and he did his best to take care of both. What he told me, I believe with all my heart. There is no doubt in my mind.
My name is Larry Roulette. I'm the son of Carl Roulette, who was a sergeant in the Air Force. And my dad and I's relationship was, I can't say it was an excellent relationship, but it was a good relationship. We never had any big problems or anything. I was in the late 80s, and I was talking to my dad. We were out in his shop, and we kind of got into a conversation about it then. And that's when he let me know that he had been on the cleanup crew that went out to pick up the crash site in 1947. So we kind of got into it. You know, he didn't want to really, you had to pry things out of him, and it was hard to do, but he was sick back then too, I believe. So I don't know. But he told me about the grays. Said he got out there and then turned around, and all of a sudden there was 3 of them laying there. You know. So they bundled them up and took them back to the dispensary on the base. After they got out here and they found out they were in over their heads out here, they flew them to Dallas-Fort Worth. And from there, they went to the Little Pentagon, which is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. He told me to be best if I didn't tell anybody. And then he said, you know, that the government had told them, when this incident happened, that the government had come to them or gathered them all up, the ones that was out there, and told them that they were not to say anything about this. And they threatened them with their pensions, threatened them with their lives, threatened them with their families' lives. Word came out that they told them that it was a big desert out there and you could be put in places you'd never be found if you talked about it.
I'm Pat Bush, and I was married to George Bush, the brother of Miriam. Her name was Miriam Titus whenever I knew her. She worked at the hospital, at the base hospital. She was an executive secretary there, had a high security rating. The head of the hospital there came to her one evening or one afternoon and said, I think there's something you would like to see. And he took her down to the surgical suite or whatever it was in the hospital where they had brought these beings, and they took her into the room and she saw them. They wouldn't let her get close to them, but she stood by the doorway and looked at them. As she was looking at them, one of them moved its middle finger on its hand. The hand moved. So it was, whatever it was living at that time. She went home that evening, and she was excited about what she had seen, and she sat at the dinner table and told the family what she had seen and what they had told her had happened. And they were all interested and asked questions, and the next day when she came in from work, she was very somber, and she just told them, don't ever mention what I told you, and don't ever ask me anything about it. And she was very frightened. I felt very sorry for her because she lived a very frightened life, because they had told her not to ever speak of it again and what the consequences would be. And she was frightened her whole life long about it. She passed away in this unusual way, and we started kind of looking at things and talking to people and realizing that many of the other people that were involved in it had died mysterious deaths or disappearances. She was in a motel, and she was not registered at the motel under her name. It was registered under her sister's name, which is very strange, and her sister didn't know she was there. The authorities came in because it was the sister's name and address on the registration. They called her home, and then she knew that her sister had passed away. When the police came and everything, they said that it had to be a suicide, that the door was locked from inside, like nobody could lock the door from the inside. And, you know, it was all kind of, it just skimmed over the top of it. You know, they didn't go into any research, try to find out anything about her. It just, I just don't believe that she killed herself. I think somebody else did it. There was something that was being covered up, and evidently something important enough that they would kill to keep it a secret.